The CE's supporters and opponents gear up for rival New Year's Day rallies. Fears are laid over Bangladeshi domestic helpers seeking residency here and burning the midnight oil in US fiscal cliff talks.
Supporters and opponents of Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying are preparing for their own show of force on New Year's Day. Leung's supporters will be staging a carnival at the central government offices in Tamar, which is also where demonstrators will gather at the end of their protest rally, demanding that Chief Executive step down. As Stephanie Wong reports, police have played down fears of violence erupting.
Not to be left out of the first major demonstration of the new year, supporters of the government will be holding a gathering of their own. The group known as Voice of Loving Hong Kong says it's tired of people getting in the way of the administration doing its job, and all it wants to do is spread positive energy.
We want to see less violence in Hong Kong, and we want to teach the youth generation we have to do things in socially acceptable manner. So the message we want to convey to the public and the legal members and the youth is love.
The anti-government protest organized by the Civil Human Rights Front will begin at Victoria Park. Demonstrators will make their way to the central government offices where there will be a rally in the square. At around the same time, Voice of Loving Hong Kong will hold a carnival in a nearby open area at Tamar. Police played down concerns about possible clashes between the rival groups.
If all the participants of these respective processions can conduct their meeting or processions in a peaceful and orderly manner, I don't think there's any problem. There's any problem between these two processions.
Police also defended their decision to prohibit the setting up of booths along the protest route, which Pan-Democrats say they've been doing for years.
We have the Hong Kong Expo taking place inside the Victoria Park, which attract a large number of attendants. So because of these special circumstances, after a professional risk assessment, we consider it is necessary to impose the condition.
And Cheng did not rule out removing the stalls if the parties concerned do not follow their advice. Student activists, members of political parties and others are expected to join the rally and demand Leung Chun-ying's resignation, saying the chief executive's integrity has been compromised. Indeed, a Chinese university poll conducted last week shows that the CE's approval rating has dropped. Leung's overall score is below passing at 48.9. Stephanie Wong, TVB News.
The first batch of about 1,000 domestic helpers from Bangladesh could arrive in Hong Kong in a few months. And the Bangladeshi Consul General today sought to allay concerns that they would be seeking permanent residence here. Evelina Leung reports.
Domestic helpers from the Philippines and Indonesia account for the majority of those working here in Hong Kong. However, that could soon change. The Philippine and Indonesian governments have announced plans to discourage their citizens from taking up such jobs overseas. That could result in a shortage of foreign domestic helpers here in Hong Kong by 2017, according to local employment agencies. To fight the problem, local employment agencies began talks with the Bangladeshi government with hopes to recruit domestic helpers from there.
Hong Kong recruitment agencies visited Bangladesh number of times, and they have also met their counterparts in Bangladesh, and also they met the labor department in Bangladesh, and they are about to sign an agreement. Once that is done, the recruitment will start in Bangladesh, and they will be put to training center for taking intensive training for 2 months. If everything goes well, then 2-3 months we can expect the Bangladeshi, workers in Hong Kong.
He also played down concerns that domestic helpers from his country will seek permanent residency here at the end of their tenure. Some local recruitment agencies are already preparing for the Bangladeshi helpers. The managing director of Technic Employment Service Center, Teresa Liu, said about 100 people are expected to go through its training program in Bangladesh next month, where they will learn Cantonese and how to take care of a local household. She believes local families will welcome these helpers. However, Chairman of the Hong Kong Employers of Overseas Domestic Helpers Association, Joseph Law, says it's still too early to say if Hong Kong would accept Bangladeshi domestic helpers. He believes there could be cultural conflicts as well as language barriers between the Bangladeshi helpers and local families. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Beijing has added another brick to the Great Chinese Firewall by approving new controls on internet users. The latest set of rules will require users to register their real names in a move the government says is meant to protect personal information online and safeguard public interests. Critics see it as an attempt to curb anonymous criticism of government graft and corruption. The 12-point law was adopted at the end of a 5-day session of the National People's Congress Standing Committee. Beijing promotes internet use for business and education but bans material deemed subversive or obscene and blocks access to many websites.
You're overseas now. US President Barack Obama and lawmakers are launching a last-ditch effort before a New Year's deadline to avoid a fiscal cliff. Obama and Vice President Joe Biden will meet congressional leaders from both parties at the White House overnight, Hong Kong time. They're hoping to revive negotiations on tax hikes and spending cuts, together worth $600 billion. That will begin on January 1st if no deal is reached. James Legilia reports.
U.S. President Barack Obama returned to the White House yesterday from a holiday shortened by government gridlock. As the Senate reconvened yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, a Democrat, warned that the U.S. appeared to be headed over the year-end fiscal cliff and slammed Republican House Speaker John Boehner for not immediately reconvening his chamber.
The Republicans in the House have left town. The negotiations between the President and the Speaker have fallen apart, as they have for the last 3.5 years.
Boehner, for his part, has now called the House into session for a highly unusual Sunday evening gathering. Republican Majority Leader Eric Cantor said the House could be in session until January 2nd, the day before the new Congress is sworn in. So are they going to reach an agreement? The only thing that's known is that Obama spoke to each leader individually on Wednesday. The upcoming overnight meeting would be the first time Obama has huddled with all the leaders of Congress since November 16th.
Last night I told the President we'd be happy to look at whatever he proposes, but the truth is we're coming up against a hard deadline here. And as I said, this is a conversation we should have had months ago.
Whatever the case, the conversation represents very likely the last hope for a deal before the year-end deadline. Democrats want to allow the tax cuts to expire on the wealthiest Americans and leave them in place for everyone else. Republicans want to extend the tax cuts for everyone. They also disagree on benefit cuts. In addition, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner told Congress earlier that the government would hit its borrowing limit on Monday, the final day of the year. That has brought more pressure to the process. Obama wants an increase in the borrowing limit as part of any agreement to avoid the fiscal cliff, but Republicans want concessions in return. James Legilia, TVB News.
Newly released documents reveal that the 1982 invasion of the Falkland Islands by Argentina caught then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher by surprise. The Iron Lady only saw it was likely after getting raw intelligence just 2 days before the Argentines landed. Historians say papers just released under the 30-year secrecy rule offer a dramatic insight into the events leading up to, during and after the conflict that saw Britain retake the islands after a short but bloody war. She called it simply the worst moment of her life. 3 months after the war, she told a board of inquiry that no one could tell me whether we could retake the Falklands. No one. The transcript of that dramatic testimony has now been published for the first time. As Argentine troops marched into the capital of the British-controlled islands in the South Atlantic, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher realized there was little that London could immediately do. Thatcher's handling of the Falklands crisis is remembered as one of the key tests of her leadership. Despite public confidence, Thatcher was privately terrified that sending a task force to the islands would provoke even more aggressive action by the Argentines. And given the distances and horrendous logistical challenges, there was absolutely no guarantee the operation would succeed.
You really hear how personally strange she was, how surprised she was, but also her voice really comes through there. Her sense of shock almost, and of how yeah, as I say, surprised she was that she would have to send forces to the other side of the world.
The documents also speak of the special relationship between Thatcher and then US President Ronald Reagan. And while alluding to significant assistance from Washington, the details of that aid remain secret. Despite losing several warships, the British eventually reclaimed the South Atlantic islands. The 10-week war cost the lives of almost 700 Argentinians and 250 British servicemen.
Gentlemen, I've just heard that the white flag is flying over Stanley. Hooray!
Renowned American Army General Norman Schwarzkopf died yesterday. He was 78. Schwarzkopf topped an illustrious military career by commanding the US-led international coalition that drove then Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's forces out of Kuwait in the 1991 Gulf War. A sister of Schwarzkopf said that he died in Tampa, Florida, from complications from pneumonia. He and his wife Brenda had 3 children. A much decorated combat soldier in Vietnam, Schwarzkopf was popularly known as Stormin' Norman for his notoriously explosive temper. He served in his last military assignment in Tampa as Commander-in-Chief of U.S. Central Command. It's the headquarters responsible for American military and security concerns in nearly 20 countries from the Eastern Mediterranean and Africa to Pakistan.
A late-season storm in the Philippines has killed 11 people, but spared a southern region where more than 1,000 died in a powerful typhoon earlier this month. Tropical Storm Wukong made landfall on Christmas Day. Meanwhile, a winter storm that earlier claimed at least 16 lives in the United States has now wreaked havoc in the country's northeast, trapping airliners in snow or mud in the rush after Christmas. More on that from NBC News.
A massive storm moved north, dumping more than a foot of snow in parts of New England. It's been a record-breaking system as it moved across the country.
Look at that tornado.
Spawning a reported 26 tornadoes across the South and flooding along the already hard-hit East Coast. The result, a travel nightmare for millions.
We circled for over an hour before we landed.
Yeah, it was a pretty rough flight coming in.
Yeah.
In the past 2 days, more than 2,000 flights have been canceled. In Los Angeles, many eastbound flights are delayed. In New York, stranded passengers spent the night at LaGuardia Airport, hoping for better news today.
Horrible. Not comfortable at all.
At New York's MacArthur Airport, a Southwest Airlines jet veered off the taxiway and got stuck in the mud following heavy rains overnight. High winds and rain brought flooding to many East Coast areas hit hardest by Hurricane Sandy. In Seaside Park, New Jersey, Barnegat Bay is again spilling onto the streets, threatening homes 2 months after Sandy devastated the area. In Brooklyn, near Coney Island, bulldozers stacked sand onto the dunes, renewing efforts to protect against high tide. And in Rockaway Park, Queens, the storm brought high surf, an ongoing threat given tomorrow's full moon. In several southern states today, power crews are working to restore electricity to more than 200,000 customers affected by those Christmas Day storms. New surveillance video from a drugstore in Mobile, Alabama shows how destructive the tornadoes were.